David. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. We're just recording the session.
So hi, everybody. My name is Tim Dehm. I'm the Manager of Planning and Design at Western Reserve Land Conservancy. CLEVLOT's taken up a lot of my work for the past year and a half or so. And so I'm just going to present some slides that will help orient you to what the kind of whole scope of the project is, and hopefully set the stage for a really productive workshop this afternoon. I'll kind of breeze through the slides, do a high-level description, and then at the end, I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has. So without further ado. So CLEVLOT stands for Cleveland Vacant Land Opportunity Tool. It's a 2-year grant we have from the US EPA. The grant program is called an Environmental Justice Collaborative Problem-Solving Grant. So the goal is to identify a really tricky problem kind of at the systems level of how a group of people are working together and collaborate with multiple stakeholders to develop a solution. So to kind of dive into the background, I'll talk about the vision for the project, some of our partners, our focus geography, kind of what we describe as our tool development process, the project timeline, and then I'll give a brief kind of description of what the current land bank process is and what kind of applications are available, just in case folks aren't familiar with that. So the vision is to create a collaboratively built, transparent, and accessible planning tool to accelerate vacant land reuse and advance environmental justice. So Cleveland has something like 30,000 vacant lots. 20,000 of those or so are in the Cleveland Land Bank. And we believe that if we can create a tool that helps people reuse that land, you can see development happen across the city in broadly 2 buckets. Gray development, which is things like housing or creating jobs or improving walkability near transit, things like that. And green development, which can reduce the city's maintenance burden, increase quality of life for folks, and make the city more climate resilient. So as I said, this is a collaborative problem-solving grant. So we have many project partners who have been involved in kind of providing feedback and helping us steer the directions of the project. You can see sort of the logos on front. These are kind of like the core project team who went in and applied for the grant with us. We've been really fortunate to have great partnerships within the City of Cleveland's administration. So the Department of Community Development, they own the land in the Cleveland Land Bank. The Planning Commission helps create plans and frameworks for how to reuse that land. Public Works maintains all of the lots, and the Office of Sustainability is also involved in kind of creating broader goals for how vacant land could help increase the tree canopy or create a more circular economy in Cleveland, things like that. We also have great partnerships on City Council, and then through our workshops and everything, we've kind of garnered the support and perspectives of over 30 different organizations, initiatives, and individuals. And this meeting today probably kind of doubles that number. So for the purposes of the grant, we are focusing in the southeast side of the neighborhood. This is the area serviced by our 2 CDC partners. It's also where 25% of the Cleveland Land Bank inventory is. So this is where we've kind of been conducting user research and focusing a lot of our outreach activities. So the CLEVLOT is not really a planning process. Like, we're not trying to create a document that kind of identifies 5-year goals. We're trying to create a tool that helps us reuse vacant land. And so the process we've been using follows these 5 steps of identifying the problem, researching why that problem exists and kind of the nature of the problem, creating prototype solutions to the problem. And this is where kind of that puzzle metaphor comes in, right? So we're starting to kind of like figure out like what's even the outline of that puzzle, then start to maybe play with building some of the pieces, and then building those puzzle pieces out into pilot projects. And then after the project's over, we'll kind of move into the maintenance portion of the project. The timeline, this project really started in 2021. So at the Land Conservancy, we have worked on dozens of vacant lots owned by the city to try to improve them, whether it's through pruning existing vegetation, clearing sidewalks, and planting trees, or helping develop community gardens or even new city parks. And kind of working through the city land bank process was a little bit difficult for us. So this grant kind of gave us an opportunity to take a step back and look at how the system works and what are ways that we can improve it. And that kind of launched in early 2022, our process. So the first half or so of 2022, we did a lot of user research at these stakeholder summits. And then over the winter, we had these working groups, and those working groups were tasked with creating a prototype solution to a problem they identified, a key challenge dealing with vacant land. And then right now we're kind of in this phase of building out those prototypes into usable, robust tools that will help us reuse vacant land. In December, we're going to have a Levin forum where we'll kind of present the findings and the work we've done so far. And then kind of running throughout all of this, we've had really great partnerships with academic institutions like the Case Western Reserve University's Environmental Law Clinic and Cornell Landscape Architecture students to research and kind of do deeper dives into the land bank process. Okay, so if you're not familiar with what the Cleveland Land Bank is, it's basically a department in the city that owns 20,000 vacant lots. So chances are that if you see a vacant lot in Cleveland and it's looking a little rough around the edges, it's probably owned by the city of Cleveland. And in order to access that land today, there are basically 4 different options. The first option is a license agreement, and the intended use of that is agriculture. And the terms are you get kind of 1 year temporary access, you have to have general liability insurance, and if you don't renew it, then any improvements you make on the property become the city's property afterwards. So you don't really have any ownership in the license agreement, but you do have site access. There are lease agreements, which are very flexible and the terms vary, but it's kind of like an extended license agreement. So if you were to start a community garden and you couldn't actually own the land, you'd probably get a long-term lease with the city that could last up to 10 years or something like that. Another program the city has is a side yard program. So the goal is to expand individuals' property. And you do get to own the parcel after going through the side yard program, but the parcel has to be adjacent to a structure that you own. You have to kind of demonstrate you're a good steward of your own property and you're up to date in your taxes and your building codes and things like that. And finally, the city offers development applications, which are really geared towards housing. And it's kind of a really complex process in terms of pulling permits and making sure all of your I's are dotted and T's are crossed in order to build a house. That's sort of another pathway that the land bank offers. And I kind of want to bring this up because I think that the interest for this group maybe lies outside of these. And maybe today we're going to kind of think about, what are alternative pathways. The current process, this is one of the prototypes one of our groups discussed, but basically you kind of submit your application, that application gets forwarded to 5 or 6 different people or departments or individuals, including the council person, who have to kind of respond about like whether or not it's a good idea, and then they all can kind of veto it. If it's not vetoed and they all approve it, then there's a disposition committee that'll then do another review of the application. And then it has to kind of, depending on which process you're taking, sometimes it has to go through the board of control for another level of approval before it can be given to you for site access. So this is kind of a high level of like, what's the kind of step-by-step process and who has to think about, what you want to do on a vacant lot. It's a lot of people having a hand in this process. Okay, so I'll do a brief summary of what we've created so far, and then we'll kind of get into the workshop. So we've had 2 stakeholder summits to kind of do that research of user experience. Then we had these working groups that looked at the prototypes. We had a number of we'll kind of go through what the problem statements were in the prototypes that the working groups proposed, and then we'll take a look at the pilot projects that we're working on right now. So we're in this research bucket. And the first summit, we had these sort of user experience journey maps where we had folks identify, what are the stages of somebody's journey when they're trying to reuse vacant land? What actions are they taking in order to complete those steps? What are they thinking about? Like, what are their motivations or desires, and kind of how they're feeling? And so you could see kind of the roller coaster of emotions that people go on when they want to reuse vacant lots. And we're able to kind of pull insights out from this experience. And this is a similar type of activity that we want to do today, sort of like learn from your perspective, what is your experience? What are your goals? Where do you kind of feel unhappy, or where are you kind of satisfied or very happy? So we took the insights from that activity and built our working groups, sort of synthesized, what would be a good working group topic to tackle some general challenge that's being discovered through the user experience. And that formed these 4 working groups that were really, I think, uniquely co-chaired by four members of city departments. And these were like high level administrators in the city's administration. So they were either assistant directors, commissioners, and then they were co-chairing with members of our project team. So the 4 working groups focus on 4 key challenges with vacant land reuse being long-term stewardship and support, planning criteria, metrics and integration, process transparency and community engagement, and policy and funding. So we tasked these groups with creating a prototype solution to a problem that they identified. So I'll give you an example of the first one, and then we'll kind of breeze through the other ones. But the long-term stewardship and support, they came up with a problem statement that said there's no consistent system of support that provides education, planning, and resources for green space developers, resulting in high rates of project failure and an increased maintenance responsibility for the city of Cleveland when projects fail. So it's a pretty specific problem statement in that it identifies like who's being affected, when they're being affected, and really kind of opens different pathways for creating a solution. And so their prototype solution boiled down to a web forum to access and archive crowdsourced information about planning, funding, and operating vacant land reuse projects. So they were able to draft up what that website might look. It sort of like took the form of this Reddit style forum where people could ask questions and things like that. And it was a great way to sort of explore where are limitations in this solution if you were to take it to scale. So a lot of questions around, who would maintain this and who would have access to the site and things like that. And that was sort of the goal of the prototype. It wasn't to create a solution, it was to explore the problem in a deeper way. So then the planning transparency and community engagement had a prototype, which was sort of like this little pamphlet that helped people map their journey through different stages of vacant land reuse. The policy and funding group, they kind of took that initial process that I just described and said, what if there was a shortcut option that instead of having to get everybody's approval, there's a checklist that somebody can look at. And if your application matches all the criteria on that checklist, then it gets speedier execution. The planning criteria, metrics, and integration group, they wanted to kind of figure out a way to communicate what environmental justice meant. So when you have a planning scenario, you can you sort of come to common terms with residents or people who might not be familiar with that term. So we created these visualizations that help demonstrate a difference between 2 environments in order to illustrate like there's some environmental justice issues that people point out on a common basis, like dumping on vacant lots, but they might not connect that to an environmental justice issue. So this was a way to kind of help visualize that and kind of connect a sort of jargony term of environmental justice to people's lived experiences and things they see in their everyday environment. Okay, so we took those prototypes and now we're kind of working on developing these into more robust solutions. And there's 5 pilot projects that we're working on: a vacant lot reuse priority map, a user-friendly application process, a digital resource center, a physical resource center, and a demonstration project. So the vacant lot reuse priority map, we had a summit a couple weeks ago at the Cleveland Public Library. That was significant because we're partnering with the Cleveland Public Library to kind of create that physical resource center. So looking at libraries as these local hubs where people can go and access some of the digital tools that are being developed to create a better vacant land reuse process. And in the summit, we talked about criteria for vacant lot reuse. So sort of building off of the environmental justice issues, what are other issues or conditions that we could think about in the city that we could use to create maps? The goal being to create a mixture, sort of hybrid map that can kind of combine data-driven frameworks like the 15-minute city with resident-focused input. Like this is an image from one of the focus groups we had, and kind of you synthesize that in one map, and that helps you make decisions about where projects can go in the city. So that can help you identify like which lots would be better for which purposes. So we're working on this website, a sort of how-to website. This is being done mostly with the Parks and Green Space Coalition. And we're looking at kind of creating simple guides about, basic best practices for groups who want to reuse vacant land. For the user-friendly application, the city is using this new software called Neighborly. It's like an online application software. And so imagine it's like a website. It lets you kind of see a bunch of different empty forms and you can type in your answers. And we were able to do some user testing with some members of the CLEVLOT team in order to get their perspective on like what is their kind of experience using this new tool. And then we gave that back to the city. They're going to make some updates and then we'll test again to make sure it's as smooth as possible. So today we're going to kind of just talk a little bit more about this area, which is a user. So part of the user-friendly application process is, are the right pathways for reuse there? So we have the opportunity to not only kind of think about those 3 or 4 different pathways that the city offers today, but we could say like, hey, you should have another option out there, and that would make the application process better. And so I kind of think about like, are there other pathways that people can take to get onto vacant land? So that's sort of the end of the CLEVLOT stuff, actually. And I will say, if you wanted to like take a deeper dive into anything I talked about, you can go to clevlot.org. I think that has a lot of the information about the events we've had and the prototype development. You can kind of see their process. But I think right now I'd be happy to take any questions for the next 5 minutes or so, and then I'll hand it back off to David Jurca, who will walk us through the activity.
If folks want to put questions in the chat too, we'll be happy to read them.
All right, I have a question. Hello.
Hi.
Jordan Morales. I am an entrepreneur and artist developer in Cleveland, Ohio, and I recently took over a building in the Stockyard neighborhood. So my question is, if you're an owner of a building in a neighborhood that's not quite highlighted in the zone that is hyper-focused right now, what might the timeline be to, start reaching out to some of these resourceful programs?
So although we're focusing our grant for the purposes of the grant, like a lot of our community engagement and resident focus groups and our CDC partnerships are focused in those neighborhoods, the things that we recommend to the city will apply citywide. So hopefully any improvement that we make, it's not going to be a different process for getting a vacant lot in different parts of the city.
A lot of really helpful information, Tim.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Oh, yeah, I'm out of school, so you got to understand. So there might be some screaming kids, or I got to say something. So what if you already own the lot and you want to participate in some of the programs? Is there any kind of flexibility with that?
By some of the programs which programs do you mean?
Well, no, I'm saying this program, like, you're trying to
Oh,
create like walking space or whatever. If you own a lot, can I actively work through the program if I actually have the lot already?
are you talking about through the program being CLEVLOT?
Yeah, CLEVLOT. Like, I've just been listening to y'all. I haven't been able to like track everything, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just heard some.
So if you have a vacant lot, you're certainly welcome to participate and provide feedback and everything like that in the
Okay.
process. Yeah. But if
Okay.
you have a lot, you're kind of like, you've done it.
Oh, okay.
And I think actually your perspective would be really valuable to help illuminate like what was your experience from other people. So those are really important lessons that you have and you can share.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I see in the chat, there's a question from Sandy that says, how have other cities have had similar challenges and what paths and prototypes have they followed? Is Cleveland the first? Cleveland is definitely not the first. There are a lot of cities kind of in the legacy city or Rust Belt that have huge amounts of vacant land, and they're trying to find ways to strategically dispose of it or reuse it in a beneficial way. I would say Cleveland has a few different advantages, but I think where we're not in the same place is like there's not really clear guidance from the city about which lots are available for which purposes. So if you go to Detroit or Baltimore, they have these great websites. Chicago has one now where you can see like, what lots are available for single family houses, what lots are available for side yards and things like that. And there's a little bit more clear process. And so Cleveland, a lot of what Cleveland's trying to do is just get up to that level with other cities. And if your neighborhood does not have a CDC, that is something that we're thinking about. Like how do you operate in these places where there aren't CDCs? I think we're sort of focused on where there are CDCs, and then we'll sort of create strategies beyond that.
Tim, it looks like we have a question from Andre Daly.
Okay.
Yes, hello. Sorry if I sound out of breath. I'm cutting my lawn right now with the push mower. But I was commenting, well, kind of had a question, but also a comment based on my experience. I had applied for a lot, a side yard actually. It was sandwiched between two houses in the Glenville neighborhood in about 2018. And I thought I dotted all my T's and crossed all my I's. And I found in that process, right, that it was not just hard to see where the application was going from the side of the land bank, but also just in a kind of an educational sense, right? Who walks residents through this process of kind of, this is what it takes to get it, this is what you have to do. And so I think in Glenville, my thing was I didn't necessarily have enough conversations with the councilman, right? As far as what I wanted to do, what I was going to grow, all things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And then also in my own neighborhood in Collinwood, there was a lot I was interested in for a community garden. This is a theme right now with me, community gardens everywhere. I think it's a great thing. Food is going to be more and more important as time continues. And so I think it should be grown close to home. And that's my interest there with community gardens.
Mm-hmm.
But in applying in Collinwood, I actually found that there was a couple of bigger community gardens that had kind of gotten blighted out over time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I guess because of COVID, that's kind of like it's in the rear view now, but there's still impacts we're seeing today. But because of that, I guess they didn't have the volunteer base and folks lost interest and things of that nature. And so we have some gardens in the neighborhood, but they're pretty much, they're not funded well, they're not blighted. So it almost seems as though there's a real barrier to entry for some people. And then sometimes when the applications are approved and the different folks and orgs that are actually approved to manage these things, there's still a struggle there. So I think a care model kind of is really needed in just seeing folks through the entire process. I don't think we want to keep passing fields with 6-foot high grass. I know everything can't be a community garden, but if a resident can take care of it and it's on their block or on their walking route or something like that, I think that's very important. So I hope you guys are going towards that direction.
Thanks. Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of the sort of common themes of CLEVLOT, like if somebody's a good steward of their property, they should be able to own it and maintain it. Why is that so difficult? What's sort of the safety net or system of support that exists for folks who have a garden and would want to, maybe they have to move away and they have to hand the garden off to somebody, or like what's the succession planning for a lot of these gardens? So those are all themes that we've discussed and are kind of putting together little solutions here and there for. So I appreciate those comments.
Deidre and Tim, I know we extended an invitation to Antonisha Harris, who's joined us on the call, and wanted to leave a little bit of space, for her to speak kind of about lived experience in terms of your access and creative access to vacant lots in Cleveland.
Hello, everyone. So my experience is interesting in the sense that I actually purchased the lot that I own from CMHA. So CMHA at one point had something called scattered sites. And this one in particular, the home was torn down. That process was incredibly challenging. It literally took about 3 years for them to record that I had purchased the property after them receiving a check, and it took a lot of following up. I have since applied for other lots, and it's been, again, pretty difficult. What is being asked of residents and what is not being allowed is really, really challenging. I do think that the vacant lots are actually an opportunity for people to use the space in a lot of different ways. There are over 40,000 lots altogether in this geographic area. So on my end, I do activate space. I have what I call an outdoor art gallery. So I allow artists to come and show their work, to do things, to meet neighbors, to explore. So it's not just a one style type of place. It's a place that is really just a space for people to use. Last summer, I was able to form a partnership with OHM Advisors to help for them, and they actually do architecture and landscape. They do a lot of architectural work, systems work of cities. And it was really great because they're also in the Midtown community where my space is also located. And we were able to invite community members in to learn how to develop vacant land. So we went through a full process that actually also included working with CUDC, Kent State students, to actually design the lot which they were sitting in. And so we are at the point where we do have some preliminary plans, and I will apply for funding. So I was able to, with a group of community members, go through an entire process of, now that you have a lot. So I did not do so much of how to gain a lot, but at the point where people have the lot, these are some opportunities and ways that you can actually help to activate the lot. And the folks were, they had concepts that are just not, that the city is embracing. I mean, things like just simple, small parks, parkettes, or, just on the street. They wanted to, you had people who had small businesses or small business ideas. They wanted to have a tea shop, just a small place that sold tea on a vacant lot, and so forth. The community is very hungry for solutions to these vacant lots, and they have a lot of solutions, but it just seems as if the city is it's just not working with very much innovation. I mean, for myself, I wanted to use the space to actually invite people to have conversations about whatever. We've been able to talk about gentrification in this lot. We've been able to talk about pollinators and bees and all these other things. So Cleveland does need spaces. You hear a lot of people saying we need more green space. It makes me laugh. We have a tremendous amount of green space. It's simply underdeveloped.
Thank you, Antonisha.
You're welcome.
Just for sharing more about your project, Invigorate Huff, and your experience. do we have time for a few more questions, Tim, may not have been answered yet from the chat?
I think so. Yeah, I was looking at those. So one question is about zoning issues. I know that that's like a little bit beyond the scope of CLEVLOT, but I know that there are, our zoning code is pretty old at this point, and it's not really fit to the city in the condition it is today. So I know that's something that planning is kind of looking at alternative zones who are not really within the scope of CLEVLOT. As far as county lots go, there are a couple of lots, questions about county lots. So the Cuyahoga Land Bank operates across Cuyahoga County. They were kind of created to deal with vacant and abandoned structures in Cleveland and did a lot of demolitions. And after those demolitions were done, they held on to the land for a few years. Last year, they transferred the majority of their parcels over to the city of Cleveland. So it's kind of rare that there are Cuyahoga County Land Bank parcels still out there. We're really fortunate to have the Cuyahoga Land Bank. Kind of going back to that first question about what's going on in Cleveland and other cities, because of the Cuyahoga Land Bank and the state laws that we have that allow for the sort of expedited process of foreclosure, the county helps us return vacant land or abandoned property into reusable land. It's just like once it gets to the city, it gets a little stuck. And that's what CLEVLOT's trying to unstuck. Right now, if you want a county land bank, you can go to the Cuyahoga County Land Bank website and kind of work through a different channel to access a lot. So CLEVLOT's primarily focused on the city of Cleveland's land bank rather than the counties, because the counties, it's a little bit more streamlined. When somebody loses a lease, how can someone else pick it up? That's a kind of a good question. I'm not totally sure. That's like sort of, this area of like policy that the land bank has. It's very kind of loose. There's really like, one of the big problems is there's not really a lot of like evil people at the land bank. There's just really not a lot of staff there to manage like tens of thousands of parcels. And so we're trying to kind of propose a better system to kind of take over this formless process that exists today.
We had someone ask Invigorate Hub. Thanks, Deidre.
Yeah.
Just asking Antonisha to share a name of her organization. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can post some links, Sandy. When David's explaining the activity, I'll post some links. I think there's one more question about like, could you go to the CLEVLOT website? So CLEVLOT's not really going to host a website that'll have like, these are the lots available for this purpose. We're kind of consulting with the city of Cleveland and helping steer them towards a better direction to provide better guidance. So kind of using CLEVLOT as a process for collaborative problem solving and collecting as many voices as possible and feeding that input into the city land bank so that they can create a framework for disposal and disposition that's kind of collectively created.
Okay. I think we hit on all of our questions. And so now would be a good time, David, if you'd like to introduce our activity. We'll divide everyone here into a breakout group, and we'll split up for about 20-25 minutes before reconvening.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much, Deidre. And thanks everybody for your questions. I mean, as you can see, there's some things that we're working on that we've heard before, questions that are new today. I know Tim and I will pull together and try to have some additional responses and share it with our partners from the city. But there's a lot of components. Before you acquire property, how do you find the right lot? I think like someone mentioned, how do you communicate your intentions with folks that are going to have to sign off on it, like the council person or a CDC, or if you don't have a CDC in your area, how do you deal with that? So I think one of our working groups that's focused on long-term stewardship and support, those are really a lot of the questions that they're digging into. What are these like missing pieces or like broken links in the chain of this overall process that need to be improved. So the more that we kind of create this vision of how it could work for different people from different points of view, I think the more efficient this process will be, because it's definitely like a volume problem. There's just so much vacant land, and like Antonia said, there's not enough staff to deal with it. So how can we kind of make the process flow more efficiently for different types of users, not just like one type of use? So with that in mind, thinking about artists today, we basically just created these online whiteboards where once we break out into 4 different breakout groups, one of us will be facilitating the conversation, and we're going to go through and give everybody in that breakout group an opportunity to share your thoughts, and we're going to document it and put in post-it notes. So I'm going to show you just really quickly what that looks like. So it's basically, we'll have this online whiteboard. There's 4 different breakout groups. So one of the first things, once you get into your breakout group, we just want to make sure your facilitator is in the right one. So there's 4 different colors, 4 different breakout groups. Now, each breakout group will have essentially 3 questions that we're going to ask. But if your comment falls outside of it, we'll still document it and write it down. The first question is, so start thinking about this now. What uses do artists have for vacant land? In other words, what sorts of uses might motivate an artist to obtain property from the land bank? Are they long-term or temporary? You might want to think about that. I think Antonia gave you the example of like an outdoor gallery. Do you have other types of uses? Do you actually want to build something, or do you want to use it as open space or green space? So we'll document all those ideas here and start to cluster them and organize them. The second question, kind of moving on from there, is what considerations do artists take into account? So this means like, what are the key challenges or questions that artists need to address before they access vacant lots? So we broke this up into 2 groups, kind of like, what are the challenges that you know? Maybe you've experienced a challenge yourself, so share that with us. Maybe it's a real world experience you've encountered, or maybe it's just an idea that you have in mind. Like if you were thinking about getting a vacant lot or applying to the Cleveland Land Bank, what is something that's like a barrier for you, or something that makes you hesitate to do so? Or maybe it's not a clear challenge and it's just a question that you have. So maybe you're just unsure of something, and you're welcome to share that question with us, and we'll document it here. And then the third part is a more specific kind of framing, which is, would you apply on your own for a vacant lot, or would you prefer to join an existing project, or maybe network to find a project that someone else is managing but contribute? So what are the pros and cons of applying for a vacant lot on your own versus activating an existing project that someone else is managing? And then this is just in a 2x2 square. So if you applied on your own, what are some of the pros in your mind of applying for a vacant lot on your own? And what are some of the cons of that, or what's a kind of challenge in that approach? And then what are some of the pros of joining an existing project that someone else might be managing and you can contribute to it? And then what are some of the negatives of that? So there's some specific reasons why we're interested in this kind of question, but hopefully that gives you a good overview of what we're planning to do together. And the thing is, Deidre said in the next 20 minutes, we're going to try to go through each of these. So think about like 5 or so minutes per question. And then your facilitator will document everything for you. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And now I think we'll all get distributed into our respective breakout groups. So we look forward to talking to you there.
Yes, so Meg is gonna randomly assign everyone to a group. We'll have a facilitator for each group. So we'll see you soon, and then we'll resume in 20 minutes.
Everybody, this is going to take just a minute, and I want to make sure that we have a facilitator in each group. I am sorry, my voice is gone a little bit here, so just bear with me. Okay, we're going to do auto assign. I'm going to create, and then I'll just need to hear from Tim. All rounds. David, what group have you been assigned to? Jurca. Where'd you go?
I've been assigned to room 4.
Okay, great.
Heading there now.
Okay, great. I think.
I'll be in 3.
I was at another call, so I missed the final what room.
No worries. Did
I was
you
on a-
get, you should have gotten a randomly assigned to a breakout room.
Okay, because yeah, I had another Zoom call at the same time. Cleveland
Okay.
leadership. Okay.
Okay, gotcha. So what you can do is go down to the bottom
Uh-huh.
of your, go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, and there should be a little box that says breakout rooms. If you click breakout room, it should show you which breakout room you were assigned to, or did you just hop back on right now?
I just hop back wrong right now. I don't see it.
Gotcha. Okay. Just see. Okay, it does say you're in room 3.
Meg, are you going to stay in this breakout room?
No, I'm going to move to room 3 with Key and facilitate that group because it does look like you're in room 4. It looks like Tim is in room.
David's in room 4.
Okay, so
Everyone.
you want to go in, you need to go. Tim is in 1.
You can put me
You're
in 2.
muted. You're muted, Deidre. Hold
Oh,
on.
which room should I go to?
Hold on. I'm going to move you to room 2, Andre, okay?
So JT's in room 2.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah, everybody kind of went away more quickly than I was expecting. Okay, Tim is in room 1. Deidre, you can go to room 2. Assign you to 2.
oh, thank you, because it's telling me to go to 4.
Yeah. I'm going to assign you to room 2. Okay. It's David. Is in 3. Okay. JT, I'm going to put you in room 3.
4.
Christy.
Is that what you, is this with you? And 3?
No, I just assigned you to room 3.
Is this who's running that one?
I'm going to be running group 3. I'll be there in just a second.
Oh,
And
okay,
Christy,
okay.
Yep,
Okay.
Christy, I'm putting you in room 4. Okay. So I'm going to join room 3. Christy, you should be able to join room, whichever one I just assigned you to. I believe it was room 4.
I'm trying to get in. My internet's a little spotty.
Okay, I've got to join room 3 so I can facilitate that group. Okay, so you can just click the little button at the bottom of your screen that says breakouts, and it should show you your assigned room. Okay.
Is the meeting over? Have you been here the whole time? Oh. You know. Oh, you can't hear.
I wasn't able to be unmuted for a minute, and so for some reason I got kicked out, and I've been waiting to get back in, but I was on it for the whole time. And then they broke us up into these different rooms, so now I got kicked out of it, and now I'm waiting to get back in.
Oh,
So I don't know.
we in the waiting room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And somebody else was sitting with me. Somebody else was sitting with me, and they're in another room too. So they broke us all up. So she's in a different room than I am. She's listening to something totally different. I'm still waiting.
Got you. Okay.
I think it's like 4 rooms. So yeah, I'm just
This
waiting.
is like a breakout session. Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll hold on for a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Right.
Did we come back to our room?
No,
Oh.
this should be.
I went to the main, oh, okay, this is the main room.
Drew, it's funny. I saw people sewing outside, you know, in Ghana. Like that's just what they
Oh,
do.
yeah.
You can
Yeah,
do
that's
anything
possible.
outside. Sewing classes. You can do, you know, they had those pedal machines. Old school. Hey, Miss Jones.
Hello there. Hello. It's really good to share a virtual space with you and with everyone.
This is a great group.
It is. It really is. Robin Robinson in the house.
Hey.
What a Zoom of stars.
I know. Look
if I
at
must
Deidre
say.
at work.
If I must say.
Hey, so everyone back? Okay, so I hope everyone got a chance to get through each of the questions. My group 2, we didn't quite finish, but David, how should we go about hearing back from everyone?
Yeah, we can, if someone wants to share on screen, we could just have one person share their screen and go to group 1. And then whoever the facilitator was can just give us a brief overview of what was shared in your group. And then we'll just move on to group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, and provide a summary. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Oh, Gina, sorry, you're in your jury duty. Oh my gosh. I saw that in the comments.
Jeez.
Although she was in jury duty, she somehow gave amazing feedback during our session. So
Yeah, good for you. She might be in the
no
holding
excuses,
room.
anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
Yeah.
All right. So you're up first, Tim. You're one.
Yeah, and everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
The mirror board. Okay, great. So there are a lot of different uses that artists might have for vacant land. I think for the most part, we talked about long-term uses. And I think that if I had to summarize this, there's sort of a general trend towards like art can be a way to create a business. And it often starts as like a side project, but then it develops into something more permanent. And so using vacant land can help kind of provide that stability that allows you to have a longer term project on it. We didn't really talk too much about ephemeral arts. We had some ideas in the chat about art shows and things like that. But a lot of it had to do with more permanent uses of vacant land, even talking about building tiny houses and creating vegetable gardens and things like that. One example we kept coming back to was Wynwood, which I'm unfortunately not familiar with. So I'll have to Google that afterwards. But from what I could tell, it sounds incredible. And it takes like a really long time to build up. I'm going to try to say what it is. So if I'm wrong, like please don't be upset with me. But it seems like it's sort of like a very artistically driven neighborhood somewhere in Miami.
Yeah, Wynwood Walls, right?
Florida. And so I think to create something that has that level of authenticity and things like that, it takes many, many years. And that's why thinking long term about vacant land use is important rather than sort of more ephemeral actions on vacant lots. And then some of the key challenges we talked about, I think one of the challenges, which is similar to what we've heard from other CLEVLOT sessions, but it was more like gardeners talking about this, is like there's not really like a that system of support for entrepreneurship in Cleveland that can help people connect and kind of create a good plan and the kind of find the right resources at the right time in order to develop your project. And so there were some specific challenges that people had with vacant land reuse. So like somebody has a small business and she was looking for a vacant lot to kind of set up a small shop on. And the city kind of gave this person a map and she couldn't really understand what the map was trying to tell her. And so it kind of became a roadblock that just slowed things down a lot. And so we kind of pulled out some specific things like that, especially when it comes to funding. It's trying to identify sort of just like the administrative side of funding sounds like a big challenge, like dealing with the paperwork and things like that, which I can totally relate to. But yeah, sort of again, reemphasizing the challenge of trying to create long-term plans that take decades to implement when everything seems really focused on like really rapid change. And then some questions are like, there's not really like a mentorship program. So how could you find a mentor who could help guide you through this process? How do you break into the scene? And we didn't unfortunately get to the last section because we spent a lot of our conversations up here, but I can scroll over to number 2.
All right, I facilitated for the second group, and we came up with a good number of ideas, thinking about what uses do artists have for vacant land. There was a good amount of talk about construction, having spaces, buildings to serve the community. So Robin talked about a building in Glenville. Jimmy Woody talked about constructing an art space in the Lee Harvard neighborhood. Both were saying how there aren't a lot of spaces like that currently in these neighborhoods. Talked about constructing spaces for large scale artworks, for spaces, I guess, studios to build large scale artworks, and indoor spaces for artists to rent at an affordable cost. So affordable studio space. We also talked about things for outdoor uses for vacant land. So an art park or sculpture garden, or simply a gathering space for residents. Again, along the lines of an outdoor art park, Dehm talked about a sculpture garden. We talked about pop-up storage or exhibition space that could be constructed out of shipping containers. And there was also talk about land conservation and biodiversity and maintenance of the green spaces. I don't know a whole lot about that, but planting clover to help make maintenance easier and more affordable. For the second question, we talked about cost. The cost of acquiring vacant land can be a challenge, and then making the process more collaborative between artists and the institutions they might want to collaborate with, especially around proposing projects and developing support, and really giving artists agency to lead that vision and direction. Another challenge is around thinking about how does the initiative the artist wants to do, how does that benefit residents, the community, and the city? So thinking strategically and thoughtfully about that community engagement process. And then some of the questions we talked about are, is there access to help reduce the cost of acquiring land or hosting programs on the land? So what are some of the financial resources to support those types of investments? And then what is the city doing, or other organizations like Assembly for the Arts? What are we doing to help artists think more about this process of acquiring land? And then lastly, with the table here, we didn't get very far on this either. We were getting big and deep into those first 2 questions, but thinking about joining an existing project, we talked about how collaboration is always good. If everyone, if you have a shared vision, shared roles and values, and that's clear, ensuring you have that could be helpful. But we didn't get a chance to get into the pros and cons of applying for vacant land on your own. Probably you don't have to worry about having all that information from other artists. You can just do your thing. But okay, thank you.
All right, great. Good job, everybody. Meg.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's see, this was our group that I facilitated. And I think if I had to sum it up, overall, our entire conversation, there was a lot of interest around collaboration and neighborhood investment. So we talked a lot about ownership of space rather than rental, and this idea of collaborative ownership. So looking at like co-op models and shared ownership of space, since the cost to owning can be really overwhelming, and the process can be really overwhelming for a single artist or a single individual. So we also talked about revenue generating opportunities. So one of the ideas was, let's say having something that is like a vegetable garden, and then that vegetable garden can drive another type of use and ultimately drive revenue, so back into the neighborhood. So I thought that was really interesting. Antonesia brought up a great point about, outdoor space being great for artists that have messy and material specific needs. So, she used Dale Good as an example, who's creating work that's really large scale, really messy, and was also a great opportunity for the neighborhood folks to see a working artist in action, in outside. So I thought that was really interesting. We had ideas like an outdoor stage, programs for youth. One of the other major themes that seemed to come up was the idea of a creative hub, a community gathering space. So that was it seemed like a real big interest. So it's something that where multiple artists again can come together, people can use the space in a collaborative kind of way. So we didn't get super far with the remainder, but we did get some ideas here for challenges that people are facing. Physical safety and just safety is a big concern. Safety for materials. Where are you storing things? How are you keeping your equipment safe? The physical safety of just people in the building or in the using a space. What does that look like? Financial implications also, knowing what you're getting into when you access a vacant lot. Sometimes people get access to the space, to a space or to a lot, and they don't know what kind of environmental issues are going on, and then they find out that it's like unusable space for the project or process that you want to implement there. Someone mentioned neighbors too. Neighbors are really important. Thinking about where you're putting an arts related activity, program, infrastructure, community has to be brought along, and not just, we've seen that with other things, even like rooms to let. There were, dropping, everyone thinks, oh, it's great to drop an arts thing right in the middle of this neighborhood, but not everybody is on board and kind of wants to know what's going on. So in terms of questions, if anyone from the group wants to jump in right now with questions, since we didn't get to address that, please feel free right now if we have a minute. Five minutes left. Okay, Deidre just told me we have 5 minutes left, so let's move ahead.
All right, so this is group 4. Thanks to everybody in our group. I thought it was a great conversation. We also kind of focused more on question number 1 and 2. 4 main points that were brought up was uses for vacant land by artists, large scale and sculptural installations. That was, I think, something we heard before, particularly projects that might reuse discarded materials or reusing vacant structures, similar to the Rooms to Let project in Slavic Village. Maybe that could become more common. Another one was the point that the artist community is the best catalyst for linking between these different types of uses that we're talking about. For example, stormwater combined with signage and other functional uses, that artistic perspective can help integrate it. An example of that was the Mitchells, adjacent to the Mitchells, where there's stormwater project that's a green space and it's also public art. So this vision of an artist can really help kind of connect and find patterns between different goals that we have for vacant land. The third one was think about different art practices. So could we make art practices that focus on environmental art or larger earthworks or ephemeral projects more prevalent in the city by making this like vacant land application process more amenable to those types of uses? And then lastly, like we heard before, outdoor studio space. So that was another one. And then brought up that there might be issues with it to get some community buy-in or a next door neighbor buy-in if they perceive that it could be loud or messy or work in progress. So going to the next point. What considerations do artists take into account? Some of the challenges we talked about. Yeah, that potential neighbor opposition to noise or visual clutter. There might need to be a little bit more thought given to a buffer zone, not just for visual reasons, but also sometimes noise ordinances end up being an issue. So like if you're an artist that's working late, you're not always working 9 to 5. So are there ways that there can be, recommendations to mitigate any of those challenges or potential opposition? Another big one is that there's just so much red tape. All the phone calls or the forms, the fact that sometimes it's an inconsistent system that can be particularly kind of onerous for artists. And then that there'll be investments required to clean up some of the vacant lots that are polluted, and increasingly there's going to probably be more need for those investments. And then lastly, challenges like need for amenities like parking or water or electricity, particularly if you're an artist that has that production process, so you're making things that require these inputs. So partnerships will be required with the city. A question was, why don't the back-to-back or across the street lots function for side yard expansions instead of just side to side? And that's something we've heard from other people in the CLEVLOT process. And then lastly here, one of the issues about working with others or joining an existing project is that it's hard to have a clear understanding of all the roles and responsibilities that all the parties will have to have throughout this entire vacant land process, because it's a long process. It's not just 3 months. Usually it's like planning in advance, getting funding, maintenance, upkeep. So sometimes people might not be clear about what their expectations are. And then related, it's a timing issue. So sometimes you have to rely on others. While you're ready to go as an artist, you have to wait for another institution to get their things in order and you're ready to move on to the next project, but you're still kind of in a holding pattern. So that can be frustrating. All right, that's it from our team. All right, I think we're right at time. So good. Like a minute to spare, right, Deidre?
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, I just want to thank everybody for participating in that session. I thought it was quick, but we got a ton of info. So I don't know if Tim, I'm happy to hand it back to you if you want to give us a sort of wrap up on how CLEVLOT will integrate these insights and try to be a good steward of your ideas. Tim?
Sure. Yeah, I think we're going to kind of comb through this and connect all the dots, see how it aligns with some of the other kind of directions we're heading in, like those pilot projects that I talked about, and kind of build, kind of slap them onto the project in really useful ways. So I really appreciate all the feedback, and it definitely gave me a new perspective from a lot of voices that I don't think I've heard from in a community so far. So thank you so much.
Thanks. And last thing I'll say is as we go through this next round of testing, that online application process, it could be someone from this group, like an artist perspective that we bring on, so you can try it out and give us feedback before it goes live to the public. Thanks.
I'll just wrap up by saying thank you so much to David and Tim for leading us through this wonderful presentation and activity. At Assembly, we just want to keep people informed and keep people empowered of all the resources and opportunities. So please join our email list. We'll be continuing to have conversations to progress this topic around acquiring land, both for vacant lots and beyond. We're working closely with the City of Cleveland, our CDCs, and artists throughout our region to make sure that artists in the creative community is represented and at the table when these opportunities come up. So once again, thank you, everybody. Join our email list for future notifications about convenings on similar topics, and definitely stay in touch with CLEVLOT. Dave, Tim, your work is amazing. Thanks for tackling this really challenging topic.
Thank you, Deidre. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, Assembly. Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Goodbye.